Hi, I'm Sherry and this is Gardening in the North, and today we're planting asparagus seedlings in a container. Asparagus has a lifespan of roughly 20 plus years. So it's pretty amazing that you can plant asparagus once and reap the benefits from it for years and years. This year is our 4th year having the plants that I planted, and we have already harvested 8 pounds of asparagus. So I have made a couple batches of soup, some of which I have frozen in the freezer now, so that later on in the fall we can pull out asparagus soup. We have grilled up fresh asparagus and had it for a few different dinners, and all the kids like it. And we still have some in the fridge, and I know that I need to harvest some more. So this is an amazing perennial to plant. And so I really want to plant more asparagus on the property. And I know that I'm not going to be on this property forever, but I love the idea that down the road, 10 years from now, if somebody else buys this property, they're going to be able to reap some benefits of the asparagus that I've already planted. So there are some reasons why people don't plant asparagus. Now, some of those reasons are, where you're living currently isn't your forever home, so you don't want to invest the time and energy into planting asparagus. Or you are renting and you're not allowed to do anything real permanent there. Or you're in an apartment condo type home where you only have a balcony. And so what I would say to you is that this is a great option if you're looking to grow asparagus in the short term, knowing that your living situation may be changing. So what I mean by that is, if you are renting or you're living in a place right now where in the next year you're going to be moving, you can actually plant your asparagus in a container and move it with you. Move it with you to the new location where you may have space in the ground and transplant it. For those of you that are living in an apartment or condo type home, then planting asparagus in a container is a great way to harvest your own asparagus. Now, one thing that you should know is that when you plant asparagus in containers, the lifespan of that asparagus plant is roughly 3 to 5 years. And the reason for that is asparagus roots really like to grow and explore and expand. What I mean by that is one asparagus root potentially could drill down or out 10 to 15 feet. So that's a long way for those asparagus roots to go. And when you plant them in a container, they only have a limited amount of space to go. They can't keep going like they would want to. So that's the reason that they only have the 3 to 5 year lifespan. So let's talk a little bit about the size of container that you want to be using. So you don't want to use a small container like this. This might seem fairly large if you're planting something little like this. You might be thinking that that's perfect. It's a good container for a little tiny plant. But what I can tell you is that these are going to grow so fast that this container will probably kill this plant. So you don't want to use that. What I've done is I've gone to Walmart and I purchased this 15-gallon flower planter. I think it was about $15 Canadian. And the great thing about this is how tall it is. So this is going to give those asparagus seedlings lots of space to grow, and I should get 5 years out of them. Now, I'm not going to leave them in here for 5 years. This is really, for me, an experiment on how long these asparagus roots can grow in a container and I can harvest from them. So I do have additional space where I can plant asparagus. I'm just not really sure where I want it right now. I'm currently in the process of really building on and creating a food forest strip. And I know that I want to put them out there. I'm just not sure where yet. I haven't planted all my trees and bushes yet, and I really want to figure out where I'm going to be planting those before I add in asparagus. And so that brings me to the reason why I'm not going to plant right into the food forest. These asparagus ferns will get very large and they will hang exactly the way they're hanging now, only there are going to be a lot more of them, to the point where you can't even see through them. And I really want to make sure that the space that I pick in the food forest is a space where these ferns are not going to block any of the sun getting to the other things that I've planted there. So I'm really wanting to plant the asparagus in the food forest as one of the last things. But in the meantime, I can plant it in this container and get ahead of the game on it. They will start growing in here, and it'll make it really easy for me to transplant them in a couple years and start harvesting right away. Okay, so final tip before we actually start filling the container is you want to make sure that you are filling your container in the spot where you're going to be leaving it. This is 15 gallons. Now, no problem picking it up right now because it's empty. But once I fill it, there's no way I'm going to be able to pick this up by myself. So I want to make sure that I actually fill this in the area where I'm actually going to plant the seedlings in there and walk away from it. So I'm going to get my soil, collect the container, grab these seedlings, and head to the raised bed garden to start filling the container up. I want to take a few minutes to talk about soil. So you want to make sure that any container that you're using to grow flowers or veg in, that you are using a really good potting soil. You want to make sure that there is enough drainage in that pot so that when it rains or you water it, that the roots can take what they need from that water, and it can drain through that really nice light and fluffy soil that you've provided and out through the drain holes, instead of sitting around in the bottom of that pot rotting out your roots. So one of the things that I've done is I have taken, you can see how nice and light and fluffy the soil is that I'm going to be using. I've taken a really good potting soil. I've mixed it with some manure and compost and a little bit of peat moss. I wanted to add a little bit more peat moss into it. And this is what I'm going to be growing the asparagus seedlings in. Now, I will be using a little bit of fertilizer. Once I've planted everything, I'll sprinkle a little bit of fertilizer on the top of the soil. I'm then going to add some wood chips on top of that in order to keep all of the moisture in. I'm going to water it, and as I water it, that fertilizer will slow release and the roots of these seedlings will get what they need going forward. Now, in general, I normally fertilize my asparagus plants probably twice a year, and I provide them additional wood chips on top of where they are. So I will probably do that with this as well. I may keep a little bit of a closer eye on it because there is such a small area as opposed to the plants that are growing in the ground. So let's get started. Let's start filling up the container and then we can plant our plants. That I'm going to plant 3 plants into this container. I think you could probably do 4 in this container, maybe even 5, depending on how long you're going to leave it. I'm going to only plant 3. I know that probably in the next 2 to 3 years, I will be transplanting these into the food forest area. So I think that planting 3 in this size of a container is going to give them plenty of space to grow together. And I think that they'll do great. So let's get started. I always like to lay them out first, and that's with everything. You should see my garden. I actually walk around with all of the tomato plants and lay them all out where they're going to be planted and then plant them. Then I do the pepper plants, I lay them all out. That way I know where everything needs to go, and then where I have spaces and where I can actually direct sow extra stuff. So I'm gonna do it like a triangle here and basically just dig the holes. Try to keep the soil in the pot. And then I'm going to squeeze it out. And I'm just going to show you the roots here. So it's pretty cool that I grew these from seeds from existing plants. So these asparagus plants were free. Okay, and then I'm going to do the next one. And I'm only planting them basically the same amount of soil that's covering them that's in here. Okay, these ones have a little bit more roots there. But I will tell you that they are super dry. So we haven't had rain here in probably a week. Now it's supposed to rain today. I was up on the porch doing the first part of the video, and it was spitting a bit on me, and now the sun is out, so maybe that's our rain. It's supposed to be 80% rain today, and I guess that's it. So looks like I'll have to make sure that everything gets watered again today. Okay. And then these ones are pretty good too. And then you can see this one here is pretty thick. That one right there. Okay. And there we go. So they're all in here. Now what I like to do is put my fertilizer, and I just use a 10-10-10 for these. I'm actually just going to move this up a bit so my head isn't cut off. Okay, and so I'm just going to sprinkle it on around the plants. Okay, and then I'm going to add wood chips. I want to make sure that because it's a container especially, containers really dry out fast. And having the wood chips or some kind of mulch on top of your container really helps to keep that moisture in. Wood chips are free where I live, so I use them everywhere. Okay. Just want to make sure that I'm not covering them so that the ferns have a chance to get the sunlight that they need. That's the other thing that I should mention about asparagus. You can't just cut the ferns down thinking that they're in your way and they're blocking other plants from getting sun. Because when you do that, essentially what you're doing is you're killing the plant. Those ferns are going to take the sunlight and direct it into the roots for energy. And the minute that you cut those off thinking that, you know, your other plants need the sun, you've just essentially killed these plants. So it is really important to figure out where you're going to put your asparagus before you plant them. Okay, so I think that is good. I think that there's a good amount on there. Just gonna give them some water. And so I always like to just hold the hose fairly light on the shower setting, and I hold it right over where I've planted the plant, not necessarily on the leaves, but more so the stems, so that I make sure that the water actually goes into the roots that I just planted there. And then I'll go a little bit around it. make sure that if they spread out, that they're going to be able to grab some liquid as well. Okay. And that's it. It's that easy. So stick around because I will be providing updates. I will most likely need to add some kind of support to this, and I will probably use some bamboo to start and put it into the ground and have it over top of the container so that I can tie the ferns to it. Otherwise the ferns will just be hanging over, and with my luck, when my son or my husband go around to cut the grass or trim the grass, they will get trimmed as well, and that's not what I want to happen. So I will make sure that I add the support once they need that. Thanks for spending time with me.